Aloha and welcome to the hopefully final screencast about Meteor Application Template React. This is a screencast to talk about authorization and authentication. I've kind of alluded to them in previous screencasts, but I'm going to kind of focus in on them in this one just to make sure that everybody understands. So authentication and authorization, two closely related um, concepts. Authentication is proving that you are who you claim you are. And we typically do that through a password. So you type in, your email, so you're claiming to be john@foo.com, and the way that you prove that you are john@foo.com is you supply a password. So that's authentication. And in the Meteor application template package, when we log in, we have this sign in screen, and I'll say admin@foo.com. And to authenticate myself, I'll type in the admin password. And now I'm logged in as admin@foo.com. Okay, and this leads us to the second concept, which is authorization. And authorization says, given that you are a certain user, you've been authenticated as a certain user, or given that you're not authenticated, we don't know who you are, what can you actually do on the system? So it turns out if you're not authenticated at all, okay, then you have access to the sign out page, you have access to the landing page, and you have access to the sign in page, and you have access to the sign up page. Okay, but for example, you don't have access to the list page. Okay, or the edit page. I could type a bunch of URLs in up there and I wouldn't get access to those. Once I sign in as, just to make it obvious, I'll sign in at admin.foo.com. Okay, now I have access to an add stuff. Okay, that's the add page. I have access to the list stuff, that's the list page, and I have access to an admin page, which is the admin. Okay, and I'm authorized for those pages because I'm an admin and I have the role of administrator or admin. So if I sign out and then I sign in as John@foo.com, who is a user who's authorized to be, I'm going to authenticate first, right? So I'm going to authenticate, I am John@foo.com, so I'm now authorized to see the add stuff page and the list stuff page, but I'm not authorized to see the admin page, okay? And I'll prove that to you by simply typing in admin to the menu bar, okay? And I get not authorized, all right? So yeah, it doesn't appear in the nav bar. The link doesn't appear in the nav bar, which is convenient, but certainly, that doesn't prevent someone from just typing in URLs, right? So we have to, we want to make the nav bar useful, okay, to the user by showing them the stuff they can do, not showing them the stuff they can't do. But at the same time, we can't say, oh, it doesn't appear in the nav bar, so therefore they can't do it, because they can just type stuff in, all right? And so we have to handle all of those cases with authentication, okay? With authorization, sorry. Okay, so let's go look at the code and let's see how we do all of these things. Let's start with the sign-in page, okay? And what we're going to do is use the standard Meteor login with password. This is a predefined mechanism. So Meteor comes with a nice authentication thing built in. You just basically make a form, however you want to make the form to get an email and a password. And you call this thing, and either it's going to succeed and everything will be cool, or it won't, and things won't be cool and you won't be able to display things. There's a sign up, okay, where you take some details, and then you're going to call this accounts create user to make an account. This is using the built-in Meteor accounts package, but Meteor can easily be used with other kinds of authentication. So Google has a OAuth-based authentication mechanism, and the University of Hawaii has CAS-based authentication. So another Meteor system which I've helped build called RadGrad, we don't use the built-in Meteor accounts package. For students, we use the CAS authentication package. And in that case, that's cool about that is that then when you want to kind of log in to the Meteor, to the system we build in Meteor, the login link basically redirects you to University of Hawaii controlled software and a user interface. It pops up the standard UH dialog. You type in your stuff. Maybe you got to do the Duo, two-factor authentication, all that kind of junk. Our application never sees any of that. Okay, so you do all that stuff, you type stuff, we don't see it. Eventually what happens basically is the UH authentication system sends us, in essence, a message saying, okay, this dude, Johnson at Hawaii.edu, don't worry, he's actually that person. We've proved it. Okay, so go ahead and give him whatever, authorize him whatever you want. But you don't know what his password was, and you don't know about whether he has two-factor authentication or not. That's all. We've handled that. Trust us, he's that person. Or you get something back saying, no, we don't know. This person didn't provide the right credentials. So do what you want to do under those circumstances. So the built-in authorization mechanism via Meteor accounts works great. Doesn't it's not something you have to use. You can use any other kind of authentication package that you want. But for prototyping, it's super nice. In particular, because if we go to the config package, okay, and we did this in the second video, I showed how we can define some default accounts and some default data based upon those accounts, and kind of build a system with some users and some accounts and some data. When you bring up the system automatically, and for prototyping purposes, that increases the velocity of development so much, okay, that you can do this. So it's hugely helpful during prototyping. Obviously in production, you kind of want to do a different kind of thing. And in fact, I'll just, to say, quite frankly, or to give you a user experience, a developer experience, in the RadGrad system, we have two modes. We have a little switch, okay, and we have a development mode for RadGrad, and in development mode, we actually use the built-in Meteor accounts mechanism. And it's very similar to this. It's got default data, default users. We build these kind of hypothetical students with different kinds of data. Super useful for development because we can try out different things and easily modify things. But when we take the software and we release it to production, we flip a little switch in our config thing, and all of a sudden we're not using that mechanism anymore. We're using the University of Hawaii authentication, and whole different things apply. So a single system can actually be built to use different authentication mechanisms depending upon where you are in development, whether you're in development mode or production mode. Okay, that's pretty good. That's a lot about authentication, maybe more than you wanted to know about authentication, but it's a pretty interesting thing. Okay, so next thing, authorization. So authorization says, what can you do if you're not authenticated? And we've kind of gone through that, right? Oh, well, I haven't gone through that. So to talk about authorization, the easiest way to look at that is by looking at the app.jsx file. And what you can see from this is the way this system is designed is that there are some routes where if you simply type in the URL or click a link or whatever, the router says, fine, I'm going to display that page. So landing, sign in, sign up, sign out. Don't need to do anything. No need to be authenticated in order to display these pages. And then we have a route home, which is a protected route. Okay, so that we have an element, we have a React component called protected route, whose child can be another React component, and basically this says to see the home page. If you type in the URL home, okay, as a protected route, what it does is it checks to make sure that whoever the Meteor user ID is not null, which means that's a kind of built-in Meteor function to say, hey, the authentication has succeeded. And so if that's true, then what's going to happen is the children, which is this, in this case, the landing component will be displayed. Otherwise, no, we're going to go to the sign-in page. Okay, so that's the protected route, and we see that for a bunch of things for, landing, list stuff, add stuff. basically guaranteeing that to display that React component, you have to be logged in. Then we have this admin protected route, which basically not only checks to make sure the user is logged in, but makes sure that the user is in the role administrator or admin, okay? So authorization there goes beyond just being authenticated as some user of the system. It uses this aligning roles package to make sure that the user is in an appropriate role. And that is something that gets set up, in the case of this system, at system startup time, we define the set of accounts. You could sign up for the system, but you can't use this mechanism to kind of define a role for yourself of admin. So you can't do it from the client side. The only time you can do it is from the server side. And if we go to accounts, okay, so create user, we have this role, create user, create role of admin, and add users to role. And these are things that can't be run on the client side. They have to be run on the server side to, for security. Otherwise, some client could say, yeah, I'm just going to make myself an admin. And that would not be cool. Okay, so that's most of it, right? We're going to use this protected route and the admin protected route to make sure that you have to be authenticated and have the appropriate role to see certain pages. The only other thing I think I want to talk about as well is in the nav bar. What you can see here is that, for example, to see the admin link in the nav bar, we basically check to see if the user is in the admin role. And if not, we just display up, nothing, an empty string. Otherwise, we display the link to the admin page. And some other silly things, like if you're actually logged in, we don't want to show the sign-in page. We want to show the sign-out page. So stuff like that. So that's authentication and authorization. Very important. Meteor does a very good job of implementing both of these core features. Quite easy to use, and I think you'll enjoy using them.